So in the last session, we have discussed about CSS selectors. So we have been discussing Selenium locators, and as part of that, we have discussed about CSS selectors, how to locate elements using CSS selectors. So in this session, we will discuss about XPath, most important locator. Most of the time, 90% we are going to use XPath while we are writing the Selenium scripts. So what is XPath? XPath is the full form of it is XML path language. It is XML path language. So what does it mean? So it's a query language that allows you to navigate through elements and attributes in an XML document. And in the context of Selenium, to talk in the context of Selenium, XPath is used to locate elements within a web page. So that's how we can understand. But it's a query language that allows you to navigate through the elements in an XML document, right? So so what we can say is it is used to locate elements within the web page, right? So that is XPath is an address of the element. So it actually represents the address of an element. So what we can say, XML, the full form of it is XML path language, and it's a query language that allows you to navigate through the elements. And in the context of Selenium, right? So XPath is used to locate the elements within the web page. So what we can say is it's an address of an element. So XPath is used to locate elements within a web page. That is, it is used to represent the address of the element. So how do we get the address of the element? So for that, let's actually open the website. So whenever we right click on any element, so this is a web page, and if I wanted to inspect any element here on this web page, any web element, we do right click and do inspect, right? So when you do inspect, so whatever you see here, right, in the elements, so this is what we call it as a DOM. So DOM is document object model. So DOM represents the HTML or XML document as a tree structure. So if you see this, this is like a tree structure, right? So you'll have HTML as a root node. So we call each element here as a node, right? So element in the sense like whichever is having a tag here, right? So each one is a element. We call it as a node. So this is all what we call it as a DOM, document object model, which is actually driving the web page on your browser. So if you see here, HTML is a root node because that's a starting node, right? So we call that as a root node. And under it, we had two nodes, head and body, right? So this we call it as node. Under again head, we do have some other nodes, right? So as it is following child-parent relationship, this in a tree structure format, right? So it is actually forming a tree structure format, right? So this we call it as a DOM, document object model. So document object model represents the HTML or XML document as a tree structure. It is representing a tree structure, right? So that is what we call it as a document object model, right? So where each object is corresponding to the some part of the document, right? So each element within the attributes, right? This text, everything is representing one object in the web page, right? So this is the understanding, at least high level understanding what we need for a DOM to start learning XPath. All right. So now let's jump on to the XPath. So how many types of XPath we have? So we do have two types of XPath. The XPath represents address of the element, right? In the DOM. Now, what are the types of XPath we have? We have two types of XPath. There are two types of XPath. One is absolute XPath, which we also call it as full XPath. And second one is relative XPath. absolute XPath and relative XPath. So absolute XPath, how do we get the absolute XPath? Say for example, I wanted to inspect the search store. This is the input field. So just right click on it and you can go to copy full XPath. Just do copy full XPath. Copy it here. So if you see here, it is actually representing this input field, and this is the address of it. So let's try to understand this. So this is the XPath. This is what we call it as XPath, full XPath. So how is that represented? Is so if you observe, it is actually it starts with single forward slash, and it starts with the root node. So this is our desired element or the node input, right? So HTML, we start with HTML. That's the root node. So this is how you need to construct. We construct the XPath, absolute XPath, right? So what we are doing here? So if you observe, we are starting with the root node. We wanted to traverse through this input element, right? So this input, whichever we wanted, this is our desired element, right? Now we wanted to traverse through this node. So how do we traverse through that node is HTML is the root node. So if you go here, this is the HTML node, right? And then what is under it? So it's a body. So then body, right? Within the body, like we have div tags. So if you observe, these are the div tags. One div tag. These are all the childs, right? So all these are div tags. Now, within this div tags, so there are like many div tags, but we are selecting the sixth div tag, which actually has this element, input tag. So if you see here, this input tag is within the form, or we can go in reverse from child to parent. So input, right? So where this input is coming from? This is coming from the form. See, just collapse this, you'll come to know. So this is a input is a child of form. So we have written form here. Then form is coming from, form is coming from one div. But how do we actually differentiate this div and this div? So if you observe, it is coming from some other div tag, which has two div tags as the child. And within that, the second div tag has this form. So if you see, there are two divs. I wanted to select the second div is what we represented. Again, this div is part of this header div, which is again has two divs, right? So you have to observe carefully. 1 and 2, right? So this is the reason we are represented with div2. Then again, this div2 is also part of master wrapper page div, right? So this is the reason we have given div1, or you can just simply say div as well. If there is only one div, we can say div. But if there are more than one divs, right? So then we have to call it as div1, right? So then till here it is done. Now under this, there are like many div tags, right? So this will be the sixth div. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sixth div, right? Under body, this is the sixth div tag. So we have to give that element ID, div of 6, that index. Then all these divs are under body. See, under this body. So we specified body. And body is under HTML, the root tag. HTML. So this is how, so this actually forms the address of the element, right? So we just went in reverse, but actually we write it in the from root node, right? From root node, we actually calculate or represent the address. We actually write the address of the element, right? So first HTML node, and then within that, where the actual element is present. So body, right? Again, within the body, it has multiple div tags. So within that, we have to count which div it is in, right? So it was in sixth div, if you count, right? So then div 6. So index here, again, it doesn't start with 0, right? So this is a HTML document. It is completely different. So index actually starts with 1 only. So we have to count it as 1, and it will be, it is at the sixth position, div 6. And within div 6, so if you observe, it has many divs again. So the first div, then div 2, See, it has two divs, div to, again div to, right? So again from this is the div to, and within it there is a form. See, it has a form, and within the form we have the input tag. So this is how we need to construct the address of the XPath of the element. This we call it as absolute XPath or full XPath. So why we are calling it as full XPath is we are starting from the root node till the desired element is located, right? So this we call it as absolute XPath. Now, so let's get the relative XPath. Right click on this. I'm just using DevTools here. I'm not even using SelectorsHub, right? So we can even use SelectorsHub. We'll see that later. But see now, copy. I'm using DevTools. That's all. Right click, copy XPath. We have copied full XPath. I'm copying full copy XPath. That's all. So meaning this is relative XPath. So this is what the relative XPath is. So relative XPath starts with 2 forward slashes and a tag or a star or asterisk which represents anything in regular expression. It could be anything, but wherever you find this attribute equal to some value, that is what the desired element is. So this is the relative XPath. So if you observe here, there is an ID and ID value, right? This we call it as attribute. This we have already learned, right? So this is an attribute. Now, how we are representing that in XPath? We have seen that, like how do we locate using the ID, right? By dot ID, we would have given this ID. But now if you observe how we are writing XPath here. So we are actually, if you observe, we started with 2 forward slashes, meaning it is representing the relative XPath. It is not absolute XPath. So we are not coming from the root node. Then star or a tag, input tag. So you can use input or star. So which represents, it could have anything. Anything as a tag, but it has to have the any tag. It can have any tag in the DOM, but it has to have the attribute as ID equal to small such terms is what this represents. Sorry. So this is what it is representing, right? So this is called relative XPath. Relative XPath does not follow the tree structure. Like it follows the tree structure, but it doesn't actually start from the root node like absolute XPath. It actually calculates or locates the element address relatively in the sense. So it can start from anything. So wherever you can start from any node, but wherever you find this attribute, right? So this asterisk represents anything here. That's called regular expression. And then when you find this attribute equal to value, then stop there. That's the element I wanted to locate, is what this relative XPath represents. Right now, we can even this is how you can actually find the relative XPath and absolute XPath. Both are same, like both represent the same element. Both are locating the same element, right? So you can use either full XPath or relative XPath. Both actually represent the same element on the web page, right? But if you observe, there is some difference between the two, right? So when I ask you, so looking at the about two XPath, when I ask you which XPath you prefer, right? Then what will be your answer? So looking at the XPath, the path of this, right? So the XPath, so definitely we'll say it's a relative XPath, right? So what do you say? So the reason you say is it's a very, you see, it's the path is very small, right? The length of the path is very small, whereas it looks very big, huge, right? So that's not the reason actually. That's not the right reason. So it's a very important interview question. So what's the difference between why do you which XPath you prefer? What are the types of XPath? Absolute XPath, relative XPath. You know that. But which XPath you prefer? So we prefer relative XPath. We prefer relative XPath. What's the reason? The reason is not, it is the length of the path is small. So that's not the right reason. There is a reason behind it. Say for example, I do have some HTML. HTML. So, so say for example, I have something like this in the body. There are some div tags. Okay. Within it, I could have some input like this and so on, right? So we could have another div like this. This is my web page, and this is my HTML document, right? So now, if I wanted to actually have this element A, right? So A represents anchor tag, which is a hyperlink, right? So say for example, I wanted to calculate this address of A using absolute XPath. What do we do? Slash HTML slash body, and then there are two div tags. So div2, then div3 actually, div3 and then A, right? So this is how we calculate the address. Say for example, for some reason, developer wants to have this link tomorrow. The developer wants to actually have this anchor tag to the some other location in the web page, not at the web page, not at this particular location, but wants to change this link, right? So then what happens? This div tag will be changed according to the change made on according to the requirement. This div tag has to be placed at some other place, right? So then your whatever XPath you have built, right? So that will become invalid. That will not work, right? So that will not work. So that's when we modify an existing element. And also, say for example, I wanted to add some other element, not modify the existing element, but I wanted to add some other element in between these elements. Say for example, between these two div tags. So I wanted to add some other div tag, right? So in that case, what happens? Again, like I wanted to add some other div tag. Or say for example, I wanted to add some image. In that case, what happens? And also, say for example, I wanted to add some div tag. So in that case, what happens? The div2, right? So that this will be div3, but you might be calculating as div2 in your XPath, right? So that again becomes invalid, right? So you constructed an XPath, full XPath, which will become invalid if there is an addition of an element or there is some modification of the element, or even the element can no longer be used and the element might be removed from the web page. In that case, one div will be removed, right? So in that case also, your XPath will become invalid and you again need to rewrite your XPath. That's a tedious job, right? So say this is only, we are talking only for about only one element. Say for example, there are tens of elements, then you know it's a huge task, right? It's a tedious job actually. You have to rewrite your all XPath, right? So this is the main reason why you prefer relative XPath. Then what happens with the relative XPath? You are not actually calculating the relative XPath starting from the root node, right? You are calculating it relative. So in this case, say for example, we actually calculate it as, say for example, this anchor tag slash slash for two forward slashes asterisk, then you might actually calculate it something like this. This is a tag, right? And this, so you'll actually use anchor tag here, and maybe anchor tag might have some attribute, right? So say for example, it has ID or name. You'll use that here. With this, what happens? It actually directly calculates it is directly jumping onto the element instead of going through from the root node till the child desired node, right? So it is relative. So it directly searches for where this attribute is present within the anchor tag, right? So say for example, if something changes, even this divs, anything above it, right? Whatever the parent nodes are there. So it doesn't actually impact this. impact the relative XPath address. It doesn't actually impact it. It is still remains the same, right? Only it will impact only when this element itself is changed. Like the attributes of the element itself are changed, only then it will impact. It will impact, and we need to override, which is like a very rare case you can think of. Like we don't usually change the attributes of the element. Maybe we alignment will be changed for the element. The element itself, element if the element itself is deleted, we can't do anything, right? So the XPath will be invalid, and you don't have the point of locating the element itself. But if you do have the new elements added or some other elements which are its siblings or parents are modified, so that will not impact the relative XPath. So that's the whole point, right? So this is the reason we prefer which XPath, relative XPath. We prefer relative XPath over absolute XPath. So very important interview question. Which XPath is preferred? And another linked one is, what are the differences between absolute XPath and relative XPath? So what are the differences? Absolute XPath starts with single slash, right? Whereas relative XPath starts with two forward slashes. That's first difference. Next, absolute XPath, that's clearly visible there, right? So it does not use any attributes, if you observe. It actually traverses from the root node till the desired element, right? With single slash, one by one node, right? So but it doesn't use any attributes. But relative XPath uses the attributes. Relative XPath works based on attributes. That's another difference. So if you see here, relative XPath is depending on some attribute of the element. Only then we can write the relative XPath. So absolute XPath does not depend on any attributes. It doesn't need any attributes of the element. It can traverse through the root, from the root till the desired element. But relative XPath depends on attributes. So that will be the next difference actually. It uses attributes. Relative XPath uses attributes, and absolute XPath does not use the attributes. So this traverses through each node. Absolute XPath traverses through each node till the desired element is located, right? Whereas relative XPath doesn't do that. So it directly jumps and finds the elements by using the attribute. So these are the three differences. So slash here actually represents the root node. Slash is representing root node, and absolute XPath starts with one slash, right? Representing the root node. Relative XPath starts with two slashes. We have seen that, right? So this represents a relative XPath. And absolute XPath do not use any attributes. Relative XPath works based on attributes only. And then absolute XPath traverses through each node till the desired element is located. We have seen that. It starts from root node till the desired element is located. It traverses through all the nodes. Whereas relative XPath directly jumps onto the DOM and finds the element using the attributes. So these are the main differences between absolute and relative XPath. Now the point, when to use each XPath, right? So when do you use? So what XPath we need to use? How do we know when to use absolute XPath and when to use relative XPath? So absolute XPath, we use it when the HTML structure is simple and you think that the changes are unlikely. Then, and also when you are dealing with static content. So there is something called dynamic content as well. We'll see that in a few minutes. So there is something called static content which never changes. The content never changes on the web page. So in such cases, and also when the HTML structure is very simple and you know that it's unlikely to change. In that case, we can use absolute XPath. And when to use relative XPath? So relative XPath, we have to use when we are working with complex, dynamic web applications where you think that HTML structure may change frequently, right? And it's also preferred for its, flexibility and resilience, right? So for any changes in the DOM structure, so then we use the relative XPath. So when you are working with complex dynamic web applications where the HTML structure may change frequently, then we use the relative XPath. Because if HTML structure is frequently changed, right? So if we construct the XPath with absolute, if you write the XPath, absolute XPath, then you have to revisit and you have to rewrite the XPath every time if there is any change in the HTML structure, as absolute XPath highly depends on the structure, right? HTML structure, tree structure, right? So when you have to use the absolute XPath and relative XPath. Simple absolute XPath when you have a simple structure, HTML structure, and you know that the changes are unlikely, right? And you know that the web page will have the static content, then go for the absolute XPath. Then or else like if you feel that your web application is complex and you have multiple dynamic elements where the HTML structure may change frequently, then go for relative XPath. Right? Now let's see an example on this. Both the XPath, relative XPath and absolute XPath. I'm gonna create one package today. We'll call it as day24. We'll create a class in it. No, what we wanted to find? We wanted to find XPath. XPath for this element. Say for example, this element. Input field, right? No. So first, what we need to do? We wanted to have a WebDriver instance. So WebDriver, I'm going to create a WebDriver instance and initialize it to Chrome driver. Just hover our cursor on the WebDriver and just do Control Shift O. That's a shortcut to import the. This is okay. This is a shortcut to import the statements package, right? In which the class is present or the interface WebDriver is present. All right. So then just I'm maximizing the window. Manage.window.maximize. This we have seen in the last session. So we instantiated a driver to the Chrome browser and we are maximizing the browser window. All right. Now driver dot find element. We wanted to find the element using XPath. So if you see by dot XPath is the method we need to use here. By dot XPath and then the actual XPath. So first let us see the for one, we will see the XPath, absolute XPath. Okay, right click on it, right click on the element, copy full XPath. And then this actually locates the element, right? We know find element actually will have the web element, and web element will have the methods, different methods to perform the action. So we located the element, we wanted to perform some action on top of this. So dot send keys. So that's a text field, right? So dot send keys, some string you can pass it. So that's it. So what did we do here? Usually how do we locate the element? We use the find element method. Driver dot find element by dot. Here, this is something new to us. By dot, we are using XPath. XPath as a method and passing absolute XPath as a parameter to it. So once we find the web element, so we can actually even have this in the web element reference variable and then use that reference variable dot send keys method as well. I'm doing it in a single statement. Run as Java application. So you can see that now. The element will be located using the absolute XPath. Okay, sorry, we didn't actually navigate it to the URL, right? So it has to be navigated first to this URL, and then we need to find the element. Yeah, you can see here. So we navigated to this URL, and then it identified this element. WebDriver was able to identify the element using XPath, and a text has been entered into this input field, right? All right, so this is using absolute XPath. Now we'll see the same using relative XPath. Driver dot find element by dot XPath. Same method we'll use for relative XPath as well. Only thing here changes is right click on this, on the element, copy XPath, which actually gives us the relative XPath. And if you observe here, so observe carefully, it starts with 2 forward slashes and a star or a tag here, and then the attribute value. But if you observe, the attribute is starting with at the rate. So it has to have the suffix, prefix as at the rate, ID, that is the attribute name equal to attribute value. And attribute value, as it is in double quotes, so but XPath itself is a string, so we need to escape this double quote. So this is the reason we are using this backslash to escape the double quotes. And then dot send keys. Once we find the element, dot send keys, then we can pass some string to it. Yeah, we can see it actually does whatever is expected, right? Using the relative XPath. So we are able to achieve the same action using absolute XPath as well as relative XPath. But relative XPath is more flexible and readable, right? So from now onwards, we are going to use the relative XPath until unless we find some HTML where the HTML structure is so simple. Then we'll use the absolute XPath, right? Until then, we'll use the relative XPath. And this is about XPath with single attribute. This is related XPath and with single attribute, right? Now we'll use XPath. We'll see how we can write XPath with multiple attributes. Driver dot find element by dot XPath. How do we write the write with, multiple attributes. So say for example, this is the element, right? So we'll take the same example. Multiple attributes instead, simple. So we used ID as the attribute earlier, right? Now what we can do is we can use some other element as well, right? Some other attribute as well. Say for example, ID, right? Autocomplete name. We can use name as well, name or placeholder. Two attributes, more than one attribute we can use and find the XPath, right? So what we can do is we can use the same, and this time instead of star I'll be using the tag. So you can use either tag value or star. So both are same. I'll use input here, and then we can actually have the single quotes as well instead of this. If it is confusing, this escaping of double quotes, you can use single quotes as well. Just use single quotes. That will be simple, right? And then this is multiple. We wanted to use multiple attributes now. So this is one attribute. So as this is related to XPath, it starts with two forward slashes and then tag followed by an attribute in square braces. And attribute will have the prefix as @. So this is the syntax of it, right? So this is the syntax of it. Let me put it here. What is the syntax? You can use tag name. @ is mandatory, which represents the attribute. And in single quotes, you can have your value. So this represents the syntax. Or the same thing, you can have it using star as well. Instead of tag name, you can use star as well. Both are the valid syntax for the relative XPath. Let me put as relative XPath syntax. So I'm going back to the multiple attributes here. So two forward slashes represents relative XPath, a tag or a asterisk, and then an attribute value in square braces. So attribute value, again, attribute name starts with @, attribute name equal to, in single quotes, whatever the value here, right? And then multiple attributes. We wanted to find the XPath with multiple attributes. In some cases, ID will also be the same, right? So say for example, input username and password. Say for example, username and password both has the same ID. So in that case, we have to differentiate or uniquely locate the element using multiple attributes. So in that case, we'll use the multiple attributes. So here we're going to use placeholder or name. You can use anything. I'm using placeholder. Placeholder equal to search store. The placeholder is another attribute, right? So that is what we did, and send keys. And pass some string to it. Right? What did we do? What's the difference between the earlier one and this one is we used single attribute earlier. Now we are using multiple attributes. And also we just verifying instead of asterisk, we are replacing it with the tag. Both are same, right? And then instead of single attribute, we are using multiple attributes, two attributes here to locate the element. Yeah, it worked, right? So we were able to enter the text into the input field. All right. Using multiple attributes as well. So when do we use multiple attributes? So if you feel that single attribute is not enough to uniquely identify the element on the web page, then we can use the multiple attributes, right? Then we need to know about the XPath functions. So is that clear? Clear? Is it clear? All right. No, XPath function. So what are XPath functions we have? We have learned XPath with single attribute, how to find single attributes, and also we have seen how to find, with multiple attributes, right? Now we'll see with functions, right? With functions, XPath functions, what are XPath functions, and how do we use the XPath functions to locate the elements? Right? What are the XPath functions available? So there are 5 functions. XPath functions are and, text, contains, and starts with. We will see one by one now. So how do we use R function? We will see that first. Let me go back to the same example. We can also get this XPath, right, using SelectorsHub as well. So just click on this here in the DevTools, just below the DevTools. Below this DOM, we have DevTools here, styles, computed layout, right? So in this, you have to click on this arrow, rightmost arrow, and you see SelectorsHub here, right? If you install the extension, you'll get this. And then if you can hover on this field, you'll get the relative XPath like this, right? You can just copy it from here also. Or you can use automatically. How do you get? Using DevTools, we have seen, and also you can use SelectorsHub as well. Or you can write your own manual XPath as well. Like how we are doing it for multiple attributes, right? So we actually have written our own XPath, right? So even that is fine, right? No, XPath functions and or, right? So we'll see and first then. So you have this XPath for this element, input element, right? Now, how do we actually construct this? Using AND function. So we'll see that. Driver dot find element by dot XPath. And then we wanted to do it with AND, right? So AND is simple. We use multiple attributes, right? So in the same way, so multiple attributes is like, we wanted to match with this whole part, like this attribute. So I wanted to find an element which has ID as this attribute and placeholder. They have to have 2 attributes with these values is what we said, right? The same thing we can use. Only thing is, we instead of this, we'll just say that this and like this. In the same square brace, we mention the 2 attributes, meaning so my attribute has to have this value and also this value has to be matched. So only then such element has to be identified is what we are saying here. So it's simple. One attribute and second attribute, single first attribute and second attribute, both has to be matched. So if my element should actually match this attribute as well as this second attribute. So again, we have to follow the same syntax. Attribute will have the prefixes @ and value in single quotes. And here this is common, right? We can use either tag name or asterisk. Only thing here is and, meaning both attributes has to be matched. It will have to be the value mentioned here, right? So only then the element will be located. See, it actually matches the element and it actually have that value. Now, say for example, search store, right? So I'll just say, I'll just have some invalid value here for the placeholder. Now let's see. Remember the value of the attributes is case sensitive. And you can see it just stops and it is not able to provide the value. And you can also see the exception here. It just says no such element exception because there is no element with the attribute attribute value which we provided here. Intentionally we provided the invalid value, right? So this has to be search store. Only then it will work, right? So these are the XPath functions. XPath R, right? R function. Sorry, this is an AND function, right? Now in the same way, let's actually try writing it for AND function, R function. We'll just use R here. And say, for example, I'm going to take the same example, the same invalid one earlier, right? Now let's see what happens. So when we use R, at least one attribute has to match. So at least this attribute value can be matched true. If it is true, so it will not even search for this. So R is a condition where at least one condition has to be satisfied. And is always all the conditions has to be satisfied, right? Or at least one condition has to be satisfied. What are the conditions actually here? The attribute ID equal to this value or the attribute placeholder value has to be this value. Any one of them at least has to be true. Only then the web element can be located. I'm just closing this, running it again. Yeah, we'll see that at the end. Regarding the SelectorsHub. So you can see here, yeah, it was able to locate the element. If you observe the difference between the earlier one and earlier function, AND function and OR function, when we had AND function and we had some invalid value to this attribute, right? Then it actually failed because AND actually checks to have both attributes has to be satisfied, right? The condition of this attribute or the attribute values both has to be satisfied, has to exactly match whatever we are provided here. That has to be exactly matched, should match with the whatever we have on the DOM within the web page we are searching for, right? So both has to be satisfied. Only then this will be true. The element will be located. Whereas R function, only at least one attribute has to be matched. So in this case, this actually matched. So even though placeholder attribute value actually is invalid, so it is not actually, considering that. So ID has been true here. So it was able to identify the element correct, right? And it was able to provide the value into it. So that's the difference between AND and R. So AND actually has to satisfy all the attributes has to be satisfied. The matching values for the attributes has to be satisfied. But R, at least one has to be satisfied. At least one attribute value has to be matched to that of what we have on the DOM. So that's about XPath with XPath AND function and XPath R function, right? Now we'll see text. What is text? XPath text. So we call that as inner text. So text method, we'll use it to get the inner text. So what is inner text? We'll see that. So say for example, let's find some other element here. Okay, what we'll do is, these are all hyperlinks. Okay, anyway, that's fine. So let's inspect this. Say for example, this link, right? So I'm just inspecting this element, Apple MacBooks, this one, right? So if you see, it will have the tag as A, anchor tag, and H reference, hyperlink reference. It actually gives you the reference to that element which you are referring to. And it is represented with anchor tag A because it's an hyperlink. All right. Now, if you see it doesn't have any attributes. And I wanted to actually use the attributes. You can't use the H reference because it might change, right? Looking at it itself, you can say it might, it's just address, right? So it might even change. So you can't use the attribute, that attribute. So, and it has no other attribute. So in this case, what we can use is, what we can do is, we can use the inner text. So if you see, what is inner text here? Whatever is enclosed between the tag. So anchor tag start and anchor tag end. In between that, we do have some value if you observe the highlighted part here, right? So I think you are able to view this Apple MacBook Pro 13-inch, right? So I have selected this. Yeah, now you can see this part, right? Which is highlighted. So this part is called as inner text. So it is called as inner text, right? So it is in between the tag, right? In between the open tag and close tag of the anchor tag, right? It can be any tag even, right? So that we call it as inner text. The text which is between the tags, between the closing opening tag and closing tag. Here the tag name is anchor A, right? So this we call it as inner text. Now you can get this inner text here and can use it to locate the element using XPath. So driver dot find element by dot XPath. And how do we write it? So I'm using star here instead of the tag. And then how do we actually write the attribute for it? So we wanted to write the attribute, right? But this is not attribute, right? So this is the function called text. So text is a method. So we'll have the brackets, open brace and close brace. And then in single quotes, we have to provide the inner text. And it's a link, right? So we have to click it. The action we can perform is click. So driver dot find element by dot XPath, then relate to XPath star or any tag here, and then attribute. Usually we'll have the attribute inside it, but we don't have any attribute for this. So we wanted to use the inner text. So inner text is this value. So how do we provide the inner text? We have to use the function, XPath function called text. So this is how you need to use text followed by brackets, as this is a function representing function, right? Equal to, in single quotes, we actually provide the value of the inner text. So this whole part will actually identify the web element. So on top of web element, once it is located, I wanted to perform some action. As it is a link, we are actually doing a click, right? Yeah, you can see it clicked on it, and you can see the details of whatever link it actually clicked. You can see here it actually routed to this. If you observe this was the H reference, hyperlink reference. We have seen that, right? So you can see it here. This is the one. It actually navigated to the right page. So this is how you can use the inner text within the XPath. Now let's go to contains. Okay. Next is XPath contains method. Now let's actually navigate back to the same. and we'll have this. So we'll take again related XPath, and this time we'll take this. Okay, right click, copy XPath, or you can use SelectorsHub as well. ID equal to small search items. We can take this. Driver dot find element by dot XPath ID, right? So you can take ID, or you can see, okay, let's take placeholder. Placeholder equal to search store, right? You can take anything. I'm just taking placeholder as the attribute here. Search store, right? Instead of search store, I'll just provide only part of it, and then what I can do here is I'll just say this part contains. We'll use it something like that. Contains this value dot 10 keys. Right? What did we do here? So we contains actually is used to represent a substring of the entire attribute value. So you don't need to provide the entire attribute value, but you can actually provide the substring of it. But it has to be in sequence, right? It is such store, right? So the placeholder attribute value is such store, right? So you can actually provide the part of it, part of the attribute value, right? I just provided such here. So, but again, it has to actually represent the unique element. Only then this will be identified, right? So contains actually represents, so using the contains function. So this is the syntax. Relate to XPath tag, and within the square braces, you will have the contains method. So even text also, right? Within the square braces only, you will have the text function. Again, within the square braces only, you will have contains function as well. Contains, we are saying it has to contain placeholder attribute, fine, but the value of it can be, it has to be at least search, right? So the substring of the placeholder has to be search is what we are searching for. Contains actually looks for the substring of the entire attribute value, simply. Okay, I think we didn't pass. Okay, invalid selector exception. Where are we getting this? Y.XPath input contains. Okay, this has to be contains takes two arguments. Okay, contains actually takes two parameters. It is not equals, right? So attribute name, fine, and attribute should contain this value. So these are two parameters. It's not equals to. Instead of that, we need to use comma. Contains actually takes two parameters. First parameter is attribute name. Second parameter is a substring of it, what it has to match with the value of the attribute, right? So this actually represents the attribute. So contains placeholder represents the attribute. So the value of the attribute will be replaced here. That is such stores. In our case, such store, right? This is the valid one. And you can see if it contains this keyword is what it is searching for. That is what the contains method does. If it contains, then it will actually identify it as a valid web element, and then it will perform some action on it. Yeah, you can see here, right? So this time it was able to identify the web element and is able to provide the text we passed to it, right? So contains is a method, text is a method where we can use the inner text. Contains is a method where we can use the part or substring of the attribute value to match with the, attribute value, right? So attribute we provide the attribute name and the value we provide, but you can provide part of it, partial string of the attribute value or the substring of it. I'll just put it here, partial or substring. Matches with attribute partial or substring value. This is about contains. Now we'll see about starts with. There's another method. You can see here starts with. XPath last function starts with driver dot find element y dot XPath. I'm going to use the same one, but instead of this, I'll just say starts with. Starts with is a function. So here, what it searches for is, so it will just search for the string has to start with this, whatever we provided here, right? With the keyword, with this value, right? So placeholder is an attribute, all right, and it has to have it will have some value, right? Attribute will have some value, so it has to start with this string is what we are trying to locate. We are trying to find, right? So if it is having this attribute placeholder is having the starting string, if it is starting with this string search, then such element we wanted to locate. That is what this starts with function mean. Whereas contains, it can contain this keyword, this substring anywhere in the on the doc, anywhere in the within the attribute value. But starts with, so it has to start, definitely it has to start with this substring. The value of the attribute has to start with this string, whatever we are passing here to the starts with function, right? Start with also takes two parameters. The first one will be the attribute, and second one will be the value which it has to start with. It is a string, and it has to actually start with this string. The attribute value has to start with the string which we provide here, right? Yeah, we can see, right? It worked. So just to differentiate, what we can do is, we'll try, it has such store, right? So we can try with store as well. Contains I'm using, instead of starts with, actually starts with whatever attribute value we have. So whatever we have at the beginning, right? So that if it matches with whatever it is starting with, then this starts with the function will work, right? So contains can have any substring within the attribute value. So I'm just providing this search store, right? So this is the valid value. So I'm just providing store, and let's try this. Yeah, it worked, right? So this actually proves contains, we can actually provide the attribute and the value of it, the value of the attribute value which we wanted to match, right? Contains, it can be a substring of the entire attribute value. It can be a substring, right? It can be this part, or any other part, right? Within the attribute value, right? It will just verify if it contains this substring within this attribute value or not. But starts with function is different, right? So it actually matches with the first keyword, first key or first word within the attribute value, right? It will actually verify if it actually is starting with this value or not. So in this case, search store, right? So it has to start with search. So only in this case, this starts with function will work, because only then this placeholder will match with this value, right? So I can just provide here matches with only start value of the attribute. All right. So these are the functions, right? Now we'll see like where we actually this contains and starts with are helpful, right? So we can directly use this text or any other functions, right? So why do we wanted to use contains and start with? So this we use for handling dynamic attributes. So for handling the dynamic attributes, we use this contains and start with. So what are dynamic attributes? We'll see that now. Is that clear? If it is clear, we can actually look into the handling dynamic attributes, how we handle the dynamic attributes. Okay, I take it as yes, and then I'm proceeding. We'll see the differences between contains and starts with. So contains simple. The contains can have, it just matches if that substring is present in the entire attribute value or not. Starts with only matches with the starting value. If it is starting with the value we provided, to that starts with the function. Yeah, we'll see that now. How do we handle the dynamic attributes? What are dynamic attributes, first of all? So we'll see that now. So say for example, I have some text like this. Say for example, I have some button, right? So my button is start. So say for example, I have something called start here. And when you click on this button start, right? So let's say for example, it turns as stop. Same web element, right? But when I actually click on start, it turns and changes its attribute value as stop or its label as stop, right? So if you observe same element, but attribute is changing, right? Or the label is changing here. The attribute value is changing, start and stop. So when I click on start, stop will be enabled. The label will be changed, right? When I click on stop, again start will be enabled. So this we call it as dynamic attribute. Same element, but you will have a different, the attribute value will be changed, right? So in that case, how do you actually write? How do you actually write the XPath for this element? So in such cases, what we can do is relative XPath, just representing relative XPath with two forward slashes and an asterisk. Then what we can do, say for example, the value of it is ID, right? Then what we can do is ID equal to start or ID equal to stop. So you can use R function here to achieve that, right? Start and stop. So both are representing the same, right? So ID changes. ID is an attribute here. Start is the value. So when we click on start, it turns stop, right? So then how do we identify? what we can do is we can use R. So ID could be stop even. We don't know, right? So, but when it is stop, it has to be, we should be able to click on it. Even if it is start also, we should be able to click on it. So in such case, we can use R attribute. So my ID could be start or it could be stop, right? So in such case, we can use R function. And now, how do you use for the same part? How do you use contains? I wanted to use contains. So in that case, what we can do, contains within square braces, and then two parameters, ID, my ID should contain. So what is common in between in these two, start and stop? So if you see, it has to contain ST. So HT is common to this, right? So if it contains ST, start or stop, right? If it has same sequence of characters, then we can use contains also. Contains ST because it's a substring of the entire attribute value. So like this also we can use contains, or we can use what we can do. Okay, we have to end this and have it like this. Or what you can do, you can use starts with as well. Starts with ID is the attribute and then ST. Like this you can use for handling the dynamic attributes. Right? So in such cases, we can, these functions are handy. And also, let me give you another example. Because the attribute is changing, right? It is dynamic. So it is not the same all the time. So it's a button and it has some attribute called ID equal to start. And when you click on it, the ID value is changed to stop. So in that case, we can use R, or you can use contains, and it contains ST, or it can start with ST like this, right? So let me give you another example. So say for example, I have some HTML like this, right? So it is actually displaying some profile, right? So div, it has through three divs, and class, if you see, class attribute is same. Class name is same for all these three divs if you have the profile. So we can't use this one. It will represent multiple attributes, all the attributes. So we have to see some other attribute which is unique. So we can use multiple attributes here, ID also. But if you observe, ID is actually changing every time. It is 1, 2, 3 for this element. It is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it is dynamic. So whenever the web page is loaded, this ID might be changed. So this number might be changing always. This is dynamic. We can't predict this value. So in such case, how do you actually identify this element? Say for example, I wanted to identify this element. So we can do this div slash span inner text, right? But how do we actually get this attribute ID, right? So I wanted to use this ID attribute because I can't use the attribute class here. It is common to all the elements. So I wanted to use attribute ID, but ID value is not same for all the elements and it is always changing. So even this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are not constant for each element. So these are not fixed. This will be changed. These are dynamic. So upon page load, it actually, this number is changed, right? So in such cases, how do we write it? So in such cases also, what we can do is, we can do slash star contains. This is my relate XPath. So it will contain, or you can say it, you definitely know it will start with profile, right? So in such case, you can say start with ID. I know it will definitely start with profile is what we'll put it here. Or you can even include this hyphen if you are sure that it will have this dash or hyphen, or you can just simply say profile. So my ID starts with profile, right? So with this, no matter whatever this value is, it is dynamic and it will be changing every time when the page is loaded, right? So irrespective of that, your element will be identified as you are using start with function to actually match whatever it is starting with. So in this case, both contains and starts with both can be used. As we are actually matching with the starting part of the attribute value. Is that clear? When we have to use starts with and when we need to use the contains functions. Or else I can give you one more example. Say for example, we have different attribute values like this. So name is my attribute name, and these, say for example, these are all like attribute values. Right? So in this case, how can we write the relative XPath? So we can say contains name is the attribute, what it contains. If you wanted to match all, right? So any say for example, this is the attribute value. It might change it to like this value, like this, right? So whatever is common, you have to look for that. So it contains ABC, right? It always contains ABC. So say for example, if it was something like this. So in this case also, what we can do, you can actually use this ABC, contains name ABC. Or what is common. You can even see whatever is common here. So I think 0, 0 is also common for all the attribute values, right? So these are all can be in one shot. These can be the attribute values, or these attribute values might be changing like this. So you have to note down all the attribute values for that attribute, whatever are changing, frequently changing. You will have the note of it, and you have to see whatever is common in all of these attribute values, and then you can use that attribute value, which says that contains, right? So you can, in this case, you can even use, in this example, you can even use contains name 0, 0 as well, if you observe. And you can use starts with as well. Starts with also ABC. So starts with and contains, we can use it for handling the dynamic attributes. Dynamic attributes is the attribute value is not fixed. It's not constant. It changes. Changes on uh, page load, or performing some action that goes on changes. So you can't actually depend on a fixed attribute value. In such case, we can use this contains and starts with functions. We'll see that in the coming sessions. How do we handle those? That will come in the coming sessions. Then I'll show you how do we handle it. So we click on something and then the value of it changes. Then how do we handle it? We'll see that. But for now, just these are just think of like these are the use cases. How to use contains and starts with. Hope it is clear. All right. Now let's learn about chained XPath. What is chained XPath? So chained XPath is a technique where multiple XPath expressions are combined to locate an element. So it's a technique. So instead of one XPath, one relative XPath or absolute XPath, we'll have multiple XPath expressions. It could be a combination of relative and absolute, or it could be a multiple relative XPath. So multiple relative XPath expressions, right? So to locate an element. So that is what we call it as a chained XPath. Say for example, I wanted to locate this. Say for example, I wanted to locate this logo. You see NOP commerce here, right? So let's locate this logo. So how I wanted to identify this? So if you observe, I'm gonna take a div attribute header logo, and then I'm not having direct I can't directly use some attribute here, right? So we can use ALT, but see instead of say other than that, we don't have any other attributes here, right? So in such case, how we can write the XPath? So we'll actually start it from this div tag, and then what we can do is we will use this div first, header logo. See, but we wanted to identify this one, this image, right? So not the complete header logo, but this image, only NOP commerce logo we wanted. But we can't directly use this XPath here for this, right? So what we can do is, in this case, we'll start with this, right? We'll start with this, and then we'll traverse till this image. So how we can use this div class equal to header logo, right? So for this, we'll write the relative XPath. So for this, how do we don't need to write the absolute XPath for this header logo. We'll directly navigate to this header logo using relative XPath. How can we do that? How can we do that? I can write div. So this actually is representing relative XPath, right? Then tag attribute equal to header logo. This actually represents this part, div part, right? Using relative XPath, we actually identify this header logo. But what we are looking for this particular image or logo, right? So where it is present after this div, there is an anchor tag A, and within that it has something called img. See, div anchor tag img. Img represents image. A is representing anchor tag here. So what do we do? Till here, we are able to identify the header logo /a/img, which actually represents the path to image. So what did we do here? So we can't, as we were not able to identify, say for example, we are not able to identify with the attributes XPath for this logo, then we depend on this one, div class. So to represent this div class header logo, we use relative XPath. But this is not what we wanted to find, this header logo. Within that, there is some image that we wanted to find. So this div class, we were able to find it with relative XPath. And then what did we do? We use /a and then /image. So we are navigating from here, we are navigating to the desired element with absolute XPath, right? So /a/img. So this is relative XPath, and from here we started /a/img, right? So this we usually call it as absolute XPath, right? So when we wanted to navigate from one element till the desired element, this is absolute XPath. This is part of absolute XPath actually, considering this as the root element, root node, right? But this first part we identified using the relative XPath. So this is the combination of both relative as well as absolute XPath, which we call it as chained XPath, right? So now let's see an example. So the same example, right? So XPath, chained XPath. We'll see if this is able to identify the logo or not. Driver dot find element by dot XPath. What's the element? This one, right? So this is what we constructed. So let's use this. And then what action we can perform on the image? So we can't click it. Even though you click it, there is nothing gonna happen, and you can't read the text as it is an image. So we can use is displayed. Is displayed is a method which returns true if the element is present. If it is not present, it will return false. So it returns Boolean, right? So let's capture it, capture the result into some status. Is logo present? Is what we wanted to identify. So till here, what did we do here? So we used io.findElement method, XPath, and we have written XPath. This XPath is not like a usual XPath, but it's a bit different. How it is different? Till here, we found the relay to XPath because image we are not able to find it directly as it has, not the right attributes to find which we can use in the XPath. So those might change is what we thought. So what did we do? We found a node above it. So to find that node, which is the parent or above this image, so we use the relative XPath till here. And from there, we actually navigated to this image using the absolute XPath. So this will be the combination of relative and absolute XPath. So this we call it as a chained XPath. So let's execute this and verify. Yeah, is logo present? It is true, right? So it was able to successfully identify with this XPath, chained XPath, right? So just to give you another example on chain XPath. So let's take, you have some HTML like this, okay? So it's a main container. It has some sections in it, 2 sections in it, ID section 1, so ID section 2, right? Within it again, like you do have some headers, H2, section 1, section 2, and again unordered list items. Within that list, there is 2 lists, link 1 and link 2, which are anchor tags, right? Now I wanted to find item 4. So item 4 I wanted to find. So how do we find the item 4 here? So we wanted to write XPath to identify this item 4. So how we can find is, so we wanted to directly jump onto this div first. So item 4 div, right? So div, you can use ID equal to, what's the ID of it? Section 2, right? So you can use section 2. All right. So now we are here, but we wanted to find item 4 here, right? So you don't need to navigate till H2 like this even every time. So you know that under it, so you have item 4 as the text. So if you observe, this is the inner text. And how do you find the inner text? Using text, right? So again, this is a related XPath, and what tag it has? It has A. See, it has tag A. So tag A, and then we wanted to identify it using the inner text. See, till here, it's a relative XPath, right? Relative XPath to find this section 2. Fine. Why we are actually finding this? We wanted to locate item 4 here. So in order to locate item 4 here, it doesn't have any attributes to directly use the XPath, relative XPath. So we are depending on one of its parent, or one of its parent node to actually write the relative XPath. So this is how, because it has the attribute. It has the attribute, so we used it. So till here, it identifies this div tag using the relative XPath. This is fine. Now, from there, keeping that as the current node, we can write the XPath again, relative XPath again. Now I am not writing the absolute XPath. See, I am directly jumping onto this part, A of text equal to item 4. Because within this section, item 4 is unique. So we can directly write it like this. Say, for example, if we had some other anchor tag, and if it has like same value, right? Then you don't have any other choice. You will be writing the absolute XPath. till the desired element is reached. But we know that if you feel that this is the list item and it is unique, then we can actually use this text, inner text, and identify it using the relative XPath. So this also forms the chained XPath. So earlier example, what did we see? We saw the combination of relative and absolute XPath. But this here, we can directly use two relative XPath. Relative XPath to find this div section 2, and then from here you can directly find the item 4 using the inner text, using the relative XPath. So this is the combination of two relative XPath. So how we can define chained XPath is, so chained XPath is a technique where multiple XPath expressions are combined to locate an element. So we are combining multiple XPath expressions here, right, to locate an element. So this is what we call as chained XPath. Is that clear? Any questions? Hope it is clear. Am I audible? Okay, I'm taking it as this. So in this session, we have discussed about, like, we started with XPath. We understood what XPath is, and then we have seen what are the different types of XPath we have. We have seen examples, and we saw which one we prefer and why we need to prefer relative XPath over absolute XPath. We have seen the relative XPath syntax, and then we have saw examples on that. Examples on how to use XPath with single attribute, with multiple attributes, and then how we can retrieve the XPath automatically from DevTools and also from SelectorsHub, right? And also how we can construct our own XPath manually, we have seen. And we have also seen XPath functions or and text to, like, for getting the inner text, we can use text function. And we have seen contains and starts with, and we have seen the use cases for contains and starts with. So where exactly those will be used, like this will be used for handling the dynamic attributes. We have seen multiple examples on that. And we have also seen at the end, we have seen what chained XPath is, right? And we have seen an examples on that. All right. So if you have any questions, you can put it on the chat box regarding today's topic. I'm stopping here.